Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Mario here once again, and I'm back for some more of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of NES remakes for the Nintendo Wii U eShop download. So last time we did manage to tackle through stages 1 through 15 in the forms of the bonus stages department, and also not to mention that we've actually did manage to play through not only one, but also 4 other games here and there as well, like Donkey Kong 3, European Champion, baseball, and of course tennis. And today for this episode is the fact that we're going to be moving on into stage 16 all the way up to stage 25, and eventually we're able to finish things up by the forms of NES remakes as far as the actual main game, in addition to those challenges as well. So naturally speaking, we've got ourselves 18 more gold stars left before we reach into the final stage, the true final stage in this game, where we need to grab ourselves 600 gold stars. So that'll be a little bit of a amount of those gold stars we can able to get. But anyways, at the moment from the last video that we haven't got as many stamps as I would like to will be, but naturally though we've only got 4 stamps as it is. So anyways, so let's get started by the forms of stage number 16. We're going back to tennis once again, and this time we have to defeat the invisible opponent. So the same applies to how it does it in the forms of win the game, challenge, but in forms of the previous challenge ago in the tennis challenge selection, is that obviously we still need to win this match, because if you do win the match, then you would able to actually just accomplish this mission. So considering enough though, between baseball and tennis, both games they do have a really easy ways to able to actually get ourselves the Rainbow Stars ranking, because even though thankfully those games are very generous with me to able to actually get ourselves the Rainbow Stars rankings between these two games in those particular challenges though anyway. So anyways though, today was actually forms of the 25th of February 2018, so that means we can able to discuss upon these quite a few things though actually. First off is the fact that I've recently managed to pick up myself not only 1, but 3 retro games here and there as well. Like for instance, I've got myself 2 Game Boy Advance games and only 1 Nintendo 64 game. Well, 2 if you want to count for my package will be delivered during the likes of the beginning part of March. But even then now, let's go run down the list before I'm able to concentrating on defeating the invisible opponents. Actually, I might as well discuss more on that later until I'm able to actually bypass this mission. Again, it's not too bad, but again, you need to be right on with this particular tennis racket aiming shot, because if you manage to over-miss the tennis ball when it keeps on bouncing on the court, or in this case the actual tennis court and stuff like that, you need to be right on with the exact pixel perfect hit, because obviously if you mess one up, then you would able to give the point to some team or to some players else. So 585, so we've got about 15 more Power Stars no, not Power Stars. I kept thinking of Super Mario 64 for some reason. The Gold Stars, rather, until we get ourselves the final stage in the game. So here we go, on to stage number 17 is the forms of the final compilation challenges, and that was the forms of 4 different sections we have to deal with here. The first one we need to do is basically we need to defeat the Gorma while simply using this final arrow shot in The Legend of Zelda. The second section is by simply obtaining 5,000 points in a goal pole in the forms of Super Mario Bros. But obviously Mario is actually running for the entire time. So naturally though, kind of like how it does it in the, the Mark Speed section from Sonic 06, or in this case Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, that, we have to basically time our jumps and all that stuff, so yeah, that's all I can say about that particular section. The third section is basically we're going back to tennis. I believe this might actually be the final time we're going to be playing through tennis, actually. Because all we have to do is just basically we need to keep the rally going up to 5 shots instead of 10, unlike last time. So even then though, that's the major differences here this time is the forms of, well, technically we're on a double syndrome. So basically that we can able to actually just, keep on doing rallies for up to 5 shots as you expected, but you do need to concentrate of one of your doppelganger with you, so just in case you need to also keep an eye on the ball at all times, so just in case you won't able to mess up with your shot though, until you're able to won't mess up with your rally shots either. And of course the 4th and final section on this particular stage is that we're going back to Super Mario Bros. Again, where we have to go through World 6-4, But there's gonna be too much fire all over the place, like fire bars, plotter boost, and even a huge fireball is about to be interrupting us. So this might be really difficult though if you weren't paying too much attention, because obviously that if you manage to make one simple mistake, as I mentioned earlier, you need to be right on with jumps and also sometimes momentum. That's always been a key here. So anyway. Oh my god. Oh, darn it, that fireball just barely touched my foot. And there goes my first game over though. So, luckily though, you do have 3 points to your B points, so I'll meet you guys back. Alright, back to this part right here, folks, because obviously I've messed up at least quite a few times already. So, hopefully luckily though, there's only 4 sections throughout in this stage though, so this won't be very long until when we get to stage number 25, aka the final stage in the actual NES Remix game. Or in this case, yeah, just the entire game itself. So, anyway though, I've managed to get myself 2 Game Boy Advance games and 2 Nintendo 64 games, to be more specifically, cartridge-only versions throughout, which are... let's start with the Game Boy Advance first, although actually, kind of think about it though, I'll get into more details onto that when we get to the latest challenges. But for now, we're done with stage number 17, and we've managed to defeat Bowser for the final time in the forms of NES Remakes, not until when it gets to NES Remakes 2, that hopefully Bowser will still show up and join the likes of the more complexable games of all the bunch, so anyway. But I'll get to my final thoughts until we get to the Rainbow Stars run throughout this entirety of NES Remix eventually soon. So, anyway, stage number 18 is basically we need to defeat the Manhandler, while simply we need to able to only use the bomb to able to actually deal 1 KO right at him. So, just aim at the center and boom, there you go, mission accomplished. So naturally, this is by far the easiest mission in the entirety of the bonus stages, because you can simply just beat it for under 3 seconds. Which, kind of think about it though, that might be true. And we reached over 50,000 points right now, so we've got ourselves our new stamp right there. I believe that's actually based off from Wrecking Crew, by the forms of the eggplant enemy, where you're simply able to actually normally trap them while just using the drum. So anyway, now we move on to stage number 18, or in this case stage number 19, sorry, by the forms of going back into Donkey Kong for a final time, but this time around though, the rules itself is completely reversed. Means that we have to go all the way back to the beginning, or in this case go back to the start as what it says on the mission objective, and basically what we have to do is basically we need to, you know, just go down all the way back to the beginning where you came from. So, it's a bit like whenever they think that, that was when, imagine when Mario managed to got himself, well, mine itself included, that managed to obtain one of their girlfriend replacements by the forms of Princess Peach, and basically what happens is though is that after when I asked Pauline is that I've managed to dump you now, and then basically that's how I've managed to able to actually left out the game. So, well, at least as far as the jokes upon the someone else's YouTube channel though anyway, which even then, that's as far as I'm mainly consumption for that. So anyway, this stage can get a little bit easier, but at the same time it's pretty tricky at the same time, because it all depends on the fireballs pattern. Well, it's not so much for bad happening for the forms of the barrels themselves, because the barrels themselves aren't that much of a threat. However, though, fireballs on the other hand is going to be way more tougher than it looks, because they always trying to throw you off a bit. Come on. Oh, I forgot to jump! Oh, that was totally my fault. Hui, let's try again. Hopefully I might as well get a better luck on it this time, but it forms of just only 1 unit of health left, so I'm hoping I can able to actually pass throughout. So yeah, the games that I've managed to go with the one of those retro games I've got, which are Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge for the Game Boy Advance, and also Super Mario Advance 3, Yoshi's Island. And as for the Nintendo 64, I've managed to get myself Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 original cartridge, and while the other one might not arrive until when it gets to the beginning of March, now it's the forms of Mario Party 2. Now, I'll get into more details on that later, but for now, we actually got ourselves stage number 20, we're going back into golf, let's just say for a final time at the moment, and basically the entire challenge is sorry for a little bit of well, my throat issues and all that stuff, basically we need to get a hole-in-one. Oh my god. I cannot expect it how the fact that this might be a lot more harder than it looks. Because, again, due to the lack of depth, or in this case, the lack of judging the distance. But anyways, though, as far as my games I've managed to got so far, the ones with Banjo-Kazooie, Grunty's Revenge, because of the completionist of, not for the Game Boy Advance, not only for the Game Boy Advance games themselves, but also due to the Banjo-Kazooie collection, which at this point, I've only got Banjo-Kazooie for the Nintendo 64 cartridge, and also Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, the most controversial games of the actual series of Banjo-Kazooie series. And also Xbox Live Arcade versions of Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. So the only ones left I need to get now is the forms of Banjo-Tooie for the Nintendo 64. Granted, it might be a little bit more expensive compared to Banjo-Kazooie because due to GameCube is going to be releasing on during the likes of roughly in 2001 in North America and Japan, and then a year later in Europe in 2002. But I digress. Now let's move on to stage number 21. We're going back to Ice Climber once again, but this time we need to collect all the vegetables and grab onto the condors. So even then though, that's as far as this mission objective goes. That's all I can really say about this here. Anyway though, so yeah, as far as what I played, Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge for the Game Boy Advance, it was pretty good actually. Even then though, strangely enough though, is that I've managed to able to almost completely done with the game, because even then though, I've got that game used or anything, because even then though, that the game itself was still pretty used. But whenever I managed to boot up the game, and I finally suddenly to realize is that how the fact that my game is pretty much almost nearly towards the end. Which even then, that maybe consists of all the jiggies as almost being collective, or even just mainly due to the musical notes as also being almost collected. And I think that's about it basically, at least as far as from the you know, the 100% completion on that particular game. However though, I'm gonna be doing a 100% playthrough on Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge on my own time on Scratch, so just in case I wasn't able to actually use someone else's save file, but in forms of the used copy of Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge for the Game Boy Advance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when I've played it, it's actually pretty good. I mean, sure, it does have the exact same issue as the forms of Sonic 3D Flicky's Island for the Mega Drive version, to be more specifically, that we have to use the isometric viewpoint of that particular gameplay style, which even then, though, that's as far as memories goes, is all I can say. And while the actual game itself is actually not as bad as it used to be, but normally though, as far as to me though, is that one of the story-based elements in the forms of Banjo-Tooie, almost or in this case Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, it always feels very similar to Banjo-Tooie's storyline, except, well, this time it usually takes place in 2 months instead of like 2 years, unlike in the, well, simply put, Banjo-Tooie. But I digress. So yeah, as far as whenever I managed to able to actually get into that game, I'm also able to get into that game after when I'm done with the other Game Boy Advance game when I've recently picked up. Now it's in forms of Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3. And I was quite surprised though actually, because I've already got Yoshi's Island on the forms of the Super Nintendo Classics Mini. Oh god, I'm out of time. But luckily though, I did manage to make it there at the end, so even then, yeah, that's as far as I can see there. Oh, please don't tell me I was off by 1 star from that particular challenge. Please don't tell me. You've got to be kidding me. And I was off by 1 star for almost reached to the exact amount of unlocking that final stage. But in forms of 600 stars. Oh my god, what is going on? Anyway though. First off, we got points system, but I was off by 1 point. And now stars off by 1 gold star. That's just unbelievable. Okay, another quick error right there, because as far as you couldn't tell already, is the fact that, I got so confused with this challenge, because obviously, we're now moving on to stage number 22, we're going back into Wrecking Crew for a final time, but even then, all we have to do in this particular objectives is by simply we need to able to break all the walls. But here's the thing though, is the fact that, much like how it does it in finding your coin minigame, type of challenge, is that we need to able to actually keep an eye on your companion with you, because you don't want to let your companion try to knock you out, because even then though, this was something that's really really bothering about this particular mission as far as the actual game itself of Wrecking Crew. until when we get to the bottom portion of the actual challenge by itself. Anyway though, yeah, for the most part it wasn't too bad, but until when it gets to the point where, you know, the fireballs will come into play, and you do need to be very, very cautious with this mission, because this is by far the hardest Wrecking Crew challenge in the entire game, because not just because of the actual objective itself, but also so many things you need to avoid of. Like, for instance, the red fireballs is easily the worst enemy about this game. Especially noticeable, it's a bit like how it does it in Mario Brothers. And plus, not to mention though, you need to be really fast and quick if you're able to actually just try to wreck every single walls as possible. And also, don't trap yourselves in the drum like I did done for my first attempt, mind you. Well, granted, it might take me a multitude of attempts, unlike how it does it from the other few, which I've already done through. But even then, though, that's as far as from my consumption to it this, though. There's nothing much to say. But for the most part, though, this challenge wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. But again, it gets really, really darn difficult due to, well, the enemy contact you do need to worry about is the forms of the red fireballs, obviously. And also another thing that kind of bothers me, as you can see here, is that if I accidentally knock the wall when the opponent is getting my way, and then obviously they're trying to knock me back down, which even then, that can get really ticked me off. Although the only time you do make this stage a little bit easier is to able to trap him into the drum, but I couldn't afford to do that though, unfortunately, just because, well, I was a little bit too nerve-wracking to able to actually just accept the fact. So anyways, we've now finally unlocked ourselves the true final stage in the entire NES remakes, and now it's in forms of bonus stage number 25, and also the entirety of the game itself. So, and that belongs to Super Mario Brothers. So, yeah, it's pretty convenient. So anyway, yeah, what was I trying to say? Oh yeah, stage number 23, we've got, oh god, Cuckoo Lands, but in forms of collect 66 gold bars. Jeez, how am I gonna do that? Well, at least on the positive side notes about this particular challenge, as you can see here, is the fact that everything else is slowing down. So, naturally, if you have yourselves an easier time with controlling this thing, then you would be able to do it just fine. But again, it's all about the most complicated controls I've ever played on the NES game like this. But again, it's not as easy as it looks, at least as far as my personal preference throughout. But even then, we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens here. So, but thankfully though, this might be the final time we're going to be seeing this game, at least until when we get to the Rainbow Stars run through. Oh my god, I totally forgot about the Rainbow Stars run through on Cuckoo Land, because this is going to be really tough though, because due to the complicated controls, and also the entire gameplay itself is going to be a little bit more difficult from my experience though anyway, and basically pretty much everything through this throughout. So anyways, back into what I was saying, by the forms of another game I picked up, by the forms of Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3. I've only got to, at this point, is the forms of I've only completed 3 levels in World 1, and that was about it. And for I've played that version compared to the Super Nintendo version, well, I still really enjoy the Super Nintendo version because you can simply play it on the console. I do enjoy Super Mario Advance 3, as far as I liked it would be, because even then though, I've now finally obtained every single Super Mario Advance game saga, because even then though, the first one I've got is actually forms of Super Mario Advance, following forms of Super Mario Bros. 2, and even then though, this might be the 5th time to be able to obtain Mario Bros. Classic on the Game Boy Advance, which again, Mario Bros. On the Game Boy Advance appears 5 times, which even then though, that could be applied for Super Mario Advance 1, Super Mario Advance 2, 3, and 4, and even Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga for the Game Boy Advance, to be more specifically. But even then, this is kind of feels a bit odd for me, but even then, that's as far as for my little, things to be able to discuss upon through, but even then, there's not much else I can really talk for this point. No! Time's up. And in fact, I was off by 1 gold bar left. That's just pretty underwhelming. Hopefully I might as well try that again eventually, but even then I'll watch to see what happens here. But I might as well get the feeling I might as well am able to actually mess up on that particular pattern here again, because again, Cuckoo Land is going to be the most difficult NES game I'm ever going to be playing through at this point. So if that's the case, then yeah, I might as well have to restart for this point here. So I'll meet you guys back. Okay, I finally figured this out though, after realizing for this little trial and error situation, is that if you notice what you're doing right there, although again it's not as easy as it looks, mind you, But I digress though. We have to do the inside parts first before we're able to actually just to complete the rest. And that way we should able to do the trick to able to fill up the entirety of the thing. Because even then though, if you manage to perform that, then you would able to actually accomplish the stage with ease. So I think that's all I can say about this challenge. But apart from that though, that's not too bad, but again, it gets really complicated by the forms of control issues and also the way that the game structure works. Although the entire concept, don't get me wrong, is the forms of the entire concept of the game itself is actually very, very cool looking. But unfortunately, due to the lack of control inputs and all that stuff, it just makes it almost very unplayable for me. But I digress. I think we got to the right part, I think. Yeah, I think we got the right points, at least almost there anyway. Okay, come on, let me finish this challenge before I jump into the final 2 stages, before I'm done with the bonus stages. There we go. Oh, please don't tell me I might as well be off by... Son of a biscuit! Oh, jeez, mamma mia, I'm getting sick of these moments where I was off by 1 star for those specific objectives. Oh, there's another stage I need to get back into, among with stage 21, but hopefully I might as well do that at the end of this video, hopefully. So, anyway, so now let's move on into stage number 24, and it appears to be we're going back into Balloon Fight for the final time, but I wonder how that's going to be played out with. But even then, yeah, if you probably did not know already, that I've got myself ×2 tag onto my Donkey Kong selection of challenges is because, well, I've managed to take a break and during the likes of the first part of this recording session of this part, and this is my second part of this recording session on this particular part today. So, that's only because of how the fact that every time when you turn off the game and able to actually reset the game, your ×2 token is actually reset. So, that makes it pretty obvious with these little situations like this happens, so, you know, that's all usually happens like this. So anyways, stage number 24 is that basically we need to pop all 20 of those balloons without missing any, mind you, but everything else is slowing down. So even then though, much like how it does in Cuckoo Land, but except the fact that we need to able to do the pop all 20 of those balloons with only 1 go. So this could be very tough for me because obviously that it has been quite a while since we're actually coming back into Balloon Fight ever since, well, basically for Remake's 2 stages, but even then, that's as far as I can tell of the description for it. So anyways, back into what I was saying by the forms of this Super Mario Advance 3 Yoshi's Island game that I've got for the Game Boy Advance. And, yeah, there are some notable differences as far as I've realized, is that the only major difference between the Game Boy Advance version and the likes of the Super Nintendo counterparts is that the Game Boy Advance version actually retains extra stages, or in this case, secret stages, if you will. Because in the Super Nintendo version, it does retain the exact same thing as it does for the Game Boy Advance, like going through 6 worlds and everything. But except the fact that in the Super Nintendo version only has extra stages as far as the additional replayability comes in. And in the Game Boy Advance version, on the other hand, actually introduces secret stages. So even then, that makes it a little bit of a welcoming addition, that the reason why I've got the Game Boy Advance version of Yoshi's Island directly from it. So I digress. That was it for the Game Boy Advance games that I've got. Now let's move on to the Nintendo 64 games that I've got, specifically the cartridge versions. The first one I've already mentioned is the forms of Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64. Now, I know you guys are probably thinking that have you already got that game by the forms of the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console version? Well, truth be told, guys, I always love physical cartridge-only versions of Nintendo 64 games because of the way how usually just aesthetically pleasing looking, or even especially noticeable how the cartridges themselves are a little bit more colorful looking, and basically pretty much everything, because you know how the fact that I'm not a big fan of digital download stuff that much, because even then I was really more accustomed to the physical releases of some of the games, including DVDs as well. So that's for my circumstances though anyway. So that concludes number 26, or no, 24 for that stage. And then obviously we'll come back for those stages after stage number 25, the final stage. If you're probably wondering why I'm so depressed right now, because basically, before we get into this particular stuff, mind you, as you can see, we're actually on stage number 25, aka the final stage in the forms of not only the bonus stages, but also NES Remakes 1 itself. basically, we're going into Super Mario Bros. As you expected, but as you can see on this left side of the screen, in addition to actually having ourselves 6 health points to able to actually just manage to survive for this particular challenge, there are 44 sections in this one challenge. Because you know what that means is how the fact that the entire focus of this particular challenge is by simply we need to obtain the super mushrooms every time when you get to this next section and onwards. So yeah, this is gonna be the endurance run, because even then though that that's my biggest reason of how the fact that I was really depressed right now for this particular session. There's gonna be some multitude of issues I have with this challenge when we get to the halfway portion of this particular discussion, when we get to the halfway portion of this challenge. Which, believe me, I'll get into all of those particular numbers between when we get to these little discussions and doing nap-ons later. So anyways though, obviously, the entire challenge is basically we need to actually obtain every single super mushrooms. There's only one exception when we get to section number 14, and by the fact that we need to able to obtain the fire flower, and as you can tell when we get to section number 14, as you can clearly see on screen, which as you can see here. And here's my biggest problem I have with this challenge. For one, as I mentioned earlier, that you only have to tackle through 44 sections in one stage, which is quite a lot. Secondly, is that you only have limited of 6 health points, which is not enough to able to actually go through all 44 sections on that particular one stage. Thirdly, is the fact that you might as well expecting you get some mistakes a lot. And fourthly, is the forms of how the fact that this stage is going to be bringing you a lot of trial and errors. And also, some of these layouts in this particular challenges can get a little bit more unfair at one point or another, especially noticeable in the castle stages. But even then though, speaking of such, number 5 actually brings us to the enemies themselves, which not only Lakitus can actually almost attempt to screw you over with those plenty of spinies as you can see here, but also the worst enemy of this game will have to be the Hammer Bros, because oh my god, Hammer Bros are going to be the biggest pain in the bum in this stage. Which, believe me, when we get to 43 and especially 44, and believe me, whenever I was trying to able to record this particular stage, it took me, and I crap you not, 100 attempts on this stage alone. That just really drives me nuts, because even then though, that I almost get paranoid by this stage alone because of how the fact that you can get several mistakes. Which brings me to number 6, is that you can't be bothered to able to actually mess up with that particular movement of the mushroom itself, because if you manage to let the mushroom get away, or in this case drop down to the bottomless pit, it also counts a fail. So, number 7 is the forms of how the fact that, well, as I mentioned earlier, while the Super Mario Bros. Was actually pretty much a classical hit back in the day, jumping and momentum in this game, it feels incredibly archaic. Number 8 is the forms of how the fact that, well, you know how the fact that the Wii U gamepad wasn't be as, well, it might be comfortable at one point, but when you're trying to, hold down the B button or the X button on the Wii U gamepad, you're expecting to get yourselves a pain on your thumbs, which can get a little bit more irritating, in this case hand cramps, mind you. And, number 9 reason is the fact that sometimes while Mario is about to be hitting himself on its little blocks, as you can see right there, granted I've messed up on that section right there, section number 33, and again, you can't be bothered to actually keep on whacking yourself on your blocks themselves, because even then though, if you manage to accidentally do that, you waste your speed and you won't able to get your super mushroom just in time until you're able to actually let that thing get away, and or just basically just to manage to able to retry that section again. 10th is the forms of how the fact that you can't be bothered to able to actually just to clarify if you're able to get some mistakes before you reach to the final selection of sections. And the final reason is the forms of how the fact that if you desperately want to get your 3-star rankings, especially with the rainbow stars in this stage, you need to be absolutely perfect on this run, because if you use the continue, you won't get yourself 3 stars, because obviously, much like how it does it in Kid Clown in the Crazy Chase game by the forms of the Super Nintendo game, granted that game wasn't aged well enough, but that game also requires you to able to not use the continue before you see the real ending, which is kind of feels the exact same thing for this challenge. But even then, yeah, this can take me 100 attempts on this particular challenge, which by that means that if you want to get yourselves 100% completion on this particular game alone in any NES remakes, especially the entire challenge by itself, you can't be bothered to use the continue, because you cannot even continue unless if you grab yourselves the third and final, or in this case 3 stars, including Rainbow Stars ranking. These 2 stages are by far the hardest and the painest out of them all, because 42 is basically just we need to keep an eye on the Koopa Shell at all times, so just in case you weren't able to actually just to kill yourself with the Koopa Shell. And 43 can go to hell because there's going to be Hammer Bros involved. And basically, you can't be bothered to mess up with that mushroom either, because if you manage to let the mushroom get away, chances are you also managed to fail on that particular task in one hand. But even then though, that's, yeah, there we go. And luckily for me, I've got 3 Rainbow Stars. And believe me, this is by far the hardest and possibly the ultimate toughest challenge in the entirety of NES Remakes 1. Good lord, what a marathon we had to go through. Even endurance how this will go. Kinda like how it does in the Endurance Rally or the Endurance Alley for the forms of Mario Party 6. But even then though, that's as far as I can really try to say for this little description goes. And I'll definitely deserve a stamp, mind you, and we've got ourselves a Dodongo from The Legend of Zelda. So, naturally we've gone through all the stages except the final 2 stars, which are consist of stage 21 and 23. So even then though, I'm also able to jump cut for those particular last 2 footages before you're able to actually go for the entirety of the golden stars run through. And naturally we've go all the way up to 612 maximum amount of stars you can only hold up to in this particular game. But that's as far as I can really try to say. So yeah, I'll meet you guys back in the forms of the final 2 stages run for the successful attempt. So I'll meet you guys back to where it was. Alright, so let's get started by the forms of stage 21. Yeah, much like last time, I need to commentate on things by the forms of the successful attempts of the forms of the 3-star rankings run through of both Ice Climber and Cuckoo Land at the same time. So just in case I just want to get this game finished by the forms of just only for the main playthrough of the game. Well, until we get to the extra videos by the forms of the Rainbow Stars run through, I'm actually going to be decided to able to discuss upon things is that there's going to be a huge delay to able to finish up with the NES Remakes game itself, because I decided to do a Rainbow Stars run through until when it gets to June. Because I say that because I decided to save that up in June when it gets to the point when the E3 2018 stuff is happening, so that's why I decided to able to actually discuss upon that, because obviously if I do it throughout in the end of the February, oh my god, it might take me a long time to able to actually process for this particular process of able to actually get ourselves the Rainbow Stars ranking on those particular challenges themselves. So anyways though, we actually move on to the true final stage for getting the 3rd and final star. But even then though, that afterwards, then we pretty much done with the golden stars. So I believe it doesn't require you unlockable or anything when you're trying to able to get all the golden stars in NES Remakes, I don't think. But until when it gets to NES Remakes 2, that thing starts to get a little bit more interesting when it comes to features and unlockables, which even then though, that hopefully Sonic will actually get into that during at some point in July. So it might be a perfect way to able to actually just to go ahead and just decide to say that. But anyway though. But yeah, that's as far as I can really tell for this point, folks, because even then though, oh yeah, I'm actually decided to say that, how the fact that I will get into more details about the other games that I just recently picked up. But unfortunately though, we've run out of time for this discussion because I've already explained how the fact that stage number 23, and especially stage number 25 in the bonus stages department, are by far the hardest challenges of the bunch, because it'll take me a lot of attempts to doing so, and basically you're gonna have to deal with these kinds of stuff as possible. So anyways, unfortunately we don't get ourselves the all the stamps that I was hoping it would be, which usually speaking we've got at the moment 53,007 points. So Naturally though, we've only got 2 stamps in this particular episode. So, there we go folks, we got all these golden banners by the forms of every single catalog in NES remakes as you can see here. So everything else is all fully bright and cheery right there. Well, some exceptions by the forms of, as you can tell, between Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr., including Pinball. These are the only games I've got myself a rainbow outline. That's because, until when it gets to June, I might decide to come back to this game by the forms of going through the Rainbow Stars run-through with every single challenges actually has to offer, because I might not do that in the end of February because I decided to take a break on this game because I just want to let Sonic want to go back into Kingdom Hearts Final Mix because he hasn't got into that during the likes of about a month ago. So I thought to myself I might as well able to take my break for this game for quite a long time until when we get to June when the E3 2018 Nintendo is about to be happening. So I thought to myself I might as well able to do that because there's going to be a lot of announcements to make. So anyways, yeah, we only got about 7 more stamps left in the forms of the stamp collection as well, so I might as well able to point things out for this point. So, with that being said folks, I'm going to have to end things off here, so join me next time by the forms of NES remakes, is that we're going to go through these Rainbow Star run-throughs of every single stages. So see you guys next time. Later fellas.